So for decades now, top public health officials and, massive longitudinal data out of places like Harvard, they've been warning us that loneliness is this lethal epidemic.
Right. Yeah. It's usually treated like this slow-moving catastrophe for human health.
Exactly. But today, we are actually looking at clinical data that proves something really terrifying and honestly completely counterintuitive.
Yeah, it really flips the script.
It does, because it shows that settling for draining, toxic company just to avoid being lonely, that is actually destroying your immune system and your brain much faster than simply sitting in an empty room.
It is a stunning reversal of how we normally think about human connection. I mean, we are deeply social primates, right?
Right.
So our cultural default is just that, any company is better than no company.
Yeah, just don't be alone.
Exactly. But the biological reality, what is actually happening under your skin, that tells a completely different story.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are listening to this right now, this conversation is going to directly impact how you look at every single text message on your phone.
Oh, absolutely. It changes everything.
We are unpacking an incredibly dense, brilliantly researched publication by PXTCH-XS, and it's titled The Hidden Tax of Draining People.
Such a great title, honestly.
It really is. And our mission today is to completely dismantle the idea that, annoying or difficult people are just background scenery.
Right. They aren't just an annoyance.
No, we're going to look at the hard biology, the psychology, and even some ancient wisdom to prove that the people you surround yourself with are literally biological inputs.
And they are actively rewriting your nervous system every single day.
Exactly. So when you invite a chronically draining person into your life, whether that's a romantic partner or a close friend you've had since college.
Or a boss you just tolerate for a paycheck.
Right. You aren't actually solving the biological problem of isolation. You are literally introducing a foreign pathogen into your ecosystem.
That is exactly what it is. You are paying this hidden compounding tax on your longevity, your cognitive bandwidth, and, your physiological health.
Which is why by the end of this deep dive, you are going to completely reevaluate your social circles.
And not because you're suddenly arrogant.
Right. Not out of malice or anything like that. You're going to do it out of pure biological self-preservation.
Yes. Self-preservation is the perfect word for it.
Because to really grasp the stakes here, we can't just start with psychology. We have to start with the meat and bones, right? We have to look at what these people are actually doing to your cells.
We do. And it all starts with this concept of emotional contagion.
Yeah. And I always thought catching a vibe was just Gen Z slang.
I mean, it sounds like slang, right? But it is a literal neurological reflex.
Wow.
Humans operate on what researchers actually call a primitive contagion model.
Primitive contagion. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, when you sit across from someone, your brain does not wait for you to consciously decide how to feel about them. It's totally automatic.
So it's happening without me knowing.
Yes, in milliseconds. Your brain begins to mimic their micro-expressions. You subtly match their vocal tone, their breathing rate, even their posture.
Wait. So if I'm having coffee with a friend who is chronically miserable, my facial muscles are actually twitching to match their frown, even if I don't realize I'm doing it.
Yes, your facial muscles are subtly recreating their expressions. And this triggers what clinical researchers call an afferent feedback loop.
Okay, afferent, meaning what exactly in this context?
Afferent simply refers to signals traveling inward, so from your body to your brain.
Because we usually think emotions start in the brain and travel outward, right? Like you feel sad, so you frown.
Exactly. But the afferent feedback loop means it works in reverse, too. Your facial muscles mimic your friend's frown, and then those muscles send a signal back up to your brain.
Saying what?
Saying, hey, we are frowning. We must be sad. Start producing the chemistry of sadness.
Oh, wow. So emotions transfer between humans exactly like a respiratory virus.
That is literally how it works. It's a completely mechanical hack of the nervous system.
That is just wild.
It is. And there was this massive social media experiment a few years ago that proved just how sensitive this mechanism is.
The one with the algorithm tweaks, right?
Yeah. The researchers subtly altered the algorithm for hundreds of thousands of users. And they didn't show them, videos of people screaming or crying.
Right. Nothing overt.
No. They just slightly increased either the positive or the negative text-based posts on their feeds. Just words on a screen.
And what happened?
The users who were exposed to more negative text, unconsciously began generating and posting more negative words themselves.
So even without physical proximity, like without hearing a voice or seeing a face, the emotional state of others physically altered their output?
Precisely. Now, I mean, take that mechanism and apply it to the person you sleep next to every night.
Oh, man.
Or, the coworker sitting 3 feet away from you for 40 hours a week. They aren't just annoying you. They are continuously calibrating your nervous system's baseline.
Which naturally brings us to the stress response, because I think everyone vaguely understands, like fight or flight, right? Cortisol, adrenaline.
Yeah, the basic survival mechanism.
Yeah, if I'm hiking and a bear jumps out, my body floods with chemicals so I can run.
Right. And in the animal kingdom, that acute stress response is an absolute miracle.
Yeah, it keeps you alive.
Think about a zebra being chased by a lion. Its brain detects a life or death threat, and the body floods with glucocorticoids. It runs.
Right.
And if it escapes, 3 minutes later, that stress response completely shuts off. The zebra goes back to calmly eating grass. The system returns to baseline.
But humans don't go back to eating grass.
We really don't.
Because, I can trigger that exact same massive biological dump of glucocorticoids just by seeing a specific name pop up on my phone's caller ID, right?
Exactly. Because of our highly evolved cerebral cortices, we can generate the exact same life or death biological stress response just by anticipating a hostile interaction.
But because I don't physically run away or, punch my boss in the face, that chemical flood doesn't get burned off.
Right, you just sit there, and those chemicals just sit in your tissues.
It's like revving a car engine in neutral with the accelerator pushed to the floor. The car isn't actually moving, but the engine is completely overheating and tearing itself apart.
That is a perfect analogy. And when you do that for years, it creates what medical researchers call an allostatic load.
Allostatic load?
Yes.
Yes.
This is the cumulative wear and tear on the biological systems from chronic stress.
So the exact same hormones that save your life in a 3-minute sprint against a bear become highly corrosive when they are just dripping into your bloodstream 247 for 3 years.
Exactly. They actively accelerate the aging of your cells, they disrupt your sleep architecture, and crucially, they actively suppress your immune system.
And the immune system suppression is where the research in the source material gets genuinely unbelievable to me.
The blister study, right?
Yes. There was this study on married couples that literally stopped me cold. They brought couples into a clinical hospital setting, and they actually gave them small, standardized physical wounds.
Like little suction blisters on their arms.
Yeah. It was a highly controlled environment designed specifically to measure the speed of tissue repair.
Right, a pure biological metric.
And then they had the couples engage in different types of conversations. The couples who had supportive, loving dynamics, they talked normally, and the researchers tracked their healing.
Surveillance.
But then they took couples with pre-existing marital strain who had hostile, draining interactions and asked them to discuss a point of conflict.
And the results were staggering.
The hostile couples healed at only 60% the rate of the supportive couples.
Let that sink in. A 40% drop in the body's fundamental ability to repair its own flesh.
Their wounds literally stayed open and bleeding for significantly longer, just from talking to their spouse.
It's incredible. And their blood work showed elevated inflammatory markers throughout their entire bodies.
From a conversation.
Yes. Because if you are sitting in a room with a hostile person, your body is reallocating so much metabolic energy to surviving the psychological threat that it literally abandons the physical maintenance of your tissue.
Wow. Okay, so let's unpack this. Treating a toxic friend or a manipulative partner like they are just a bad mood is completely scientifically inaccurate.
Completely wrong.
It's more like sitting in a small, unventilated room with someone who is chain smoking. The secondhand smoke isn't a metaphor for stress. It is a physical substance entering your lungs and mutating your cells.
Secondhand smoke is exactly the right parallel. A draining relationship is a measurable physical tax on your biological longevity.
And if you zoom out and look at the massive syntheses of mortality data, like studies tracking hundreds of thousands of people over their lifetimes, the math aligns perfectly, right?
Yeah, it does. Researchers found that having strong, supportive social relationships actually increases your overall odds of survival by 50%.
A 50% increase in surviving any given health event.
Yes. The protective biological effect of good relationships is roughly equal to the effect of quitting a cigarette habit.
That is just mind-blowing.
It is statistically more powerful in extending your life than exercising, and even more powerful than losing weight.
Wow.
So when you choose to stay in a relationship that keeps your allostatic load at a constant boil, you are actively choosing to ingest an environmental toxin.
Well, if this biological damage is literally keeping our physical wounds open, the immediate survival question becomes, who is doing this to us?
Right. How do we spot them?
Exactly. How do we spot the person holding the knife, so to speak, especially when they often look like a friend? Because the internet has absolutely ruined the word toxic.
Oh, completely. It's totally overused.
If someone doesn't text you back in 5 minutes, TikTok diagnoses them as a covert narcissist, so we need a real taxonomy of these people.
We do. And the clinical literature provides a very clear map for this. We really have to separate the heavyweights from the subtle drainers.
Okay, let's start with the heavyweights.
On the heavyweight side, we are looking at the clinical profiles, what diagnostic manuals call cluster B personalities, and what researchers categorize as the dark tetrad.
Dark tetrad. Sounds ominous.
It is. These are individuals where the draining behavior isn't an accident. It is the core architectural feature of how they interact with reality.
And the most famous one in that group is obviously the narcissist.
Right.
But I've always thought of a narcissist as like the guy at the party wearing a flashy suit, talking loudly about his cryptocurrency portfolio and how he's smarter than everyone else.
Yeah, that's the overt type, the classic stereotype.
But the source material highlights a second type that seems infinitely more dangerous, which is the covert narcissist.
The covert or vulnerable narcissist is far more insidious because they don't look like the stereotype at all.
What do they look like?
They are often introverted. They might even seem shy or self-deprecating. But their grandiosity isn't channeled through bragging. It is channeled through intense victimhood and moral superiority.
So it's not, I'm the best and richest. It's, I am the most uniquely misunderstood and suffering person on earth, and everyone is failing me.
Exactly. They are hypersensitive to any slight, whether it's real or entirely imagined. They constantly feel that the world has, failed to recognize their hidden genius.
So they just simmer with this quiet, entitled rage.
Yes. And if you are close to a covert narcissist, you will find yourself constantly apologizing for things you didn't even do just to soothe their bottomless, unfillable sense of being wronged.
It sounds like walking on invisible eggshells that change location every single day.
It's exhausting.
You can never get it right because their victimhood is literally their power source.
Precisely.
And then the source brings up the dark tetrad, which includes narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and everyday sadism, which just sounds like a horror movie.
Everyday sadism is a relatively new addition to the clinical literature. And I agree, it is chilling.
Because we aren't talking about serial killers in the woods, right?
No, we are talking about everyday people. It could be your brother-in-law or your coworker, people who literally expend effort for the sole purpose of hurting others.
There was that bug-killing study mentioned in the source that was just
Wow. A famous psychological paradigm. The methodology was fascinating. They gave participants a modified coffee grinder and cups of live bugs and gave them the option to grind them up.
just to see who would actually do it.
Yes. They had to actually do physical work to operate the machine. And the takeaway was stark. Only the individuals scoring high in everyday sadism were willing to expend effort for the sole reward of causing an innocent creature pain.
That is deeply unsettling.
Right. There was no financial reward, no social status to be gained. The cruelty was the point.
So in a human relationship, this translates to the person who waits until you are having a genuinely happy moment. Maybe you just got a promotion or you're really excited about a new hobby, and they just drop a perfectly targeted, cruel comment. Not because it gives them an advantage at work, but just because they actually enjoy watching the light go out of your eyes.
Precisely. They harvest pleasure from your deflation.
Okay, so those are the clinical heavyweights.
Yes. But the research also maps out behavioral traps that everyday non-clinical people fall into. And the most famous framework for this is the drama triangle.
I see this dynamic everywhere now that I know what it is. The triangle has 3 points, right? The persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer.
Yes. It maps out how people unconsciously rotate between these roles to extract emotional energy from each other.
I want to make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. Let's say I have a friend who constantly complains that her boyfriend is terrible, but she refuses to ever leave him.
Okay, so she is firmly playing the victim.
Right. And she calls me crying, and I immediately swoop in as the rescuer. I'm offering her my guest room. I'm finding her a therapist. I'm giving her all this energy.
Right. But here's the catch. She doesn't actually want to leave him. She doesn't want a solution.
Then what does she want?
She wants the emotional payoff of being comforted and the lack of responsibility of being a victim. So she rejects every single piece of help you offer.
Like, oh, I can't stay in your guest room. My cat won't like it.
Exactly. Or, I can't go to therapy. It's just too expensive.
And eventually, because I've poured hours and hours into trying to save her, I get completely exhausted and frustrated, and I snap. I say, why are you even complaining to me if you refuse to do anything about it?
And boom, in that exact moment, you have unconsciously rotated into the role of the persecutor.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now she gets to stay the victim, but now I'm the bad guy. She can go tell someone else how mean I was to her.
Exactly. The rotation continues seamlessly. It is a closed loop of exhausting, draining energy that produces zero actual solutions. It just burns through your cognitive bandwidth.
Another term that has completely lost its meaning online is gaslighting. People use it constantly just to mean, you lied to me.
I know, it's very frustrating clinically.
But the source material reframes it as a sociological tool, which makes so much more sense.
Yes. Gaslighting is deeply rooted in social inequalities and isolation. It is not merely a psychological trick of saying, I never said that, to win a petty argument.
Right.
It is a systematic architectural erosion of your reality designed to shrink your space for action. An abuser uses gaslighting to sever your trust in your own intuition.
They alienate you from your friends.
Exactly. They position their voice as the only reliable narrator in your entire universe. It is fundamentally about captivity.
But what about the really subtle drainers? The ones that are so confusing because the interaction actually feels like friendship. The research talks about co-rumination.
Co-rumination is a huge one.
This is the friend you call when you have a bad day and you both just sit there and rehash the problem over and over for 3 hours, right?
Yes. And it feels incredibly validating in the moment. You feel heard. But the developmental research reveals a brutal socio-emotional trade-off.
What's the trade-off?
Well, co-rumination does increase feelings of closeness and bonding, absolutely. But it simultaneously causes massive spikes in internalizing symptoms.
Meaning what?
Meaning it actively generates clinical anxiety and depression in both people.
Oh, wow. It's like you are deepening the friendship by mutually digging a hole that neither of you can climb out of.
That's a great way to put it. The friend you think is your ultimate support system might actually be the anchor dragging you into clinical distress.
That's terrifying.
Then you have conversational narcissism, which is marked by the chronic shift response.
I know exactly what this is. You say, I'm so sad my dog just died, and they instantly reply, oh, I know exactly how you feel. I was devastated when my car broke down last week.
Exactly. Instead of offering a support response like, I am so sorry, tell me about your dog, they use a shift response to wrench the spotlight right back to themselves.
Right.
They view conversations not as an exchange of connection, but as an extraction of attention.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though.
Right.
I hear all of this, and my fear is that we are giving people a scientific excuse to just ditch anyone who is slightly annoying.
That's a valid concern.
Like if my best friend goes through a horrible divorce, she's going to be a complete energy drain for 6 months. She's going to co-ruminate. She's going to be a victim. How does the listener distinguish between a friend having a legitimate life crisis and a covert narcissist who is permanently toxic?
That is the essential question. And the distinction lies entirely in patterns versus incidents.
Patterns versus incidents.
Yes. A life crisis is a phase. A healthy friend will absolutely drain you temporarily, but the underlying architecture of the relationship is built on reciprocity. When you eventually hit a crisis yourself, they will rally and return the energy.
Right. The ledger eventually balances out over time.
Exactly. With a truly draining person, the depletion is permanent. There is absolutely no reciprocity. You are permanently installed in the role of the audience, the rescuer, or the emotional sponge.
So you don't look back over a 5-year friendship and see an ebb and flow.
No, you look back and see a steady, one-way outward hemorrhage of your own vitality.
Okay, the pattern is the poison. That makes total sense. Now, if these patterns are this destructive in our personal lives, where we actually have the freedom to walk away, What happens when we are forced into a room with these people for 40 hours a week?
The workplace environment.
Yeah. Let's look at the financial and cognitive devastation of workplace drainers.
The organizational data is incredibly robust here, and it makes a purely fiduciary argument. Basically, tolerating one toxic colleague is a massive financial liability for any company.
Let's start with basic incivility.
Sweeping multi-year surveys show that 98% of workers have experienced uncivil behavior.
Almost 100%. Basically, anyone who has ever clocked into a job has dealt with this.
Yes, and the downstream effects are catastrophic for productivity. Among those targeted by rudeness, 80% lost significant work time just worrying about the incident.
Just ruminating at their desk.
Exactly, and almost half deliberately decreased their effort to punish the organization. But the most alarming part is the effect on the bystanders.
The people who weren't even yelled at.
Yes. In laboratory experiments, mere witnesses to rudeness, people who just happened to be in the room when someone else was demeaned, showed a 20% drop in their cognitive performance on tasks.
That is crazy.
And a 50% drop in their willingness to help other colleagues.
That is staggering. It's like incivility is an EMP blast. If a manager berates a junior employee in an open plan office, the cognitive grid of everyone within earshot gets knocked offline by a fifth, and teamwork gets cut in half.
Exactly. And yet, companies try to justify keeping these toxic people by looking at their individual output.
Oh, the brilliant jerk archetype.
Right. There was a huge study analyzing tens of thousands of workers to find the actual dollar value of employee types. It found that if a company hires a top 1% superstar, a true genius high performer, it adds roughly $5,000 into value to the bottom line.
Okay, $5,000.
But avoiding a single toxic worker saves the company roughly $12,000.
Let me make sure I'm hearing that math correctly. Keeping a toxic person out of your company is worth more than twice as much as hiring a generational talent.
Yes, because managers usually only measure raw output. The toxic worker might hit massive sales quotas, right?
They go twice as fast as anyone else.
Exactly. So the manager thinks that they're indispensable. But what the manager doesn't track are the negative externalities.
It's like putting $1 million Ferrari engine into a car, but the engine is violently shaking and tearing apart the transmission, the axles, and the steering wheel.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how fast the engine is if the car is actively disintegrating around it.
That's it, exactly. The toxic worker is a walking cost center. They are the reason 3 of your other best employees quietly quit last quarter. They are the reason HR is spending 40 hours a week mediating disputes instead of recruiting. They bankrupt the team's morale.
Which ties directly into psychological safety. The massive studies out of places like Google found that psychological safety is the single most important bedrock for team effectiveness.
Yes, psychological safety is defined as a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking.
Meaning, can I admit I made a massive error without being publicly shamed?
Can I pitch a completely unconventional idea without being mocked? If a draining, toxic person is on the team, the answer is definitively no. And if the answer is no, learning stops entirely.
So what does this mean for the listener who is commuting right now, dreading walking into an office with a toxic manager? They're exhausted, they think they hate their career, they think they're burned out on the actual industry.
It should deeply validate their exhaustion. The research on burnout shows that it is rarely about the actual workload.
Really?
Yes. Humans are incredibly resilient. We can work brutal 80-hour weeks if we feel deeply valued, respected, and part of a cohesive mission.
That makes sense.
What we casually call burnout is almost entirely a prolonged physiological response to chronic interpersonal stressors.
It's the allostatic load we talked about earlier, just happening at a desk.
Yes. The workplace data proves that baseline respect is actually more important to employees than vision, positive feedback, or even opportunities for promotion. If you are burned out, it is highly likely it is not the work itself that is breaking you. It is the people.
Okay, so the listener hears all this. They understand the 60% drop in their immune system's wound healing. They understand the taxonomy of covert narcissism. They see the financial math and the cognitive EMP blasts.
You see the whole picture.
Right. So the absolute most logical question to ask next is, if the physical, emotional, and financial costs are this undeniably catastrophic, Why on earth do people stay?
It's the ultimate question.
Why don't we just pack our bags and walk away the moment someone drains us?
Because the architecture of the trap is incredibly sophisticated.
Uh,
We don't stay because we are weak or stupid. We stay because the trap is built out of our deepest biological instincts and highly potent psychological reinforcement.
so our brains are actually working exactly as they were evolved to work.
Yes, they are just operating in a hijacked environment.
Let's break down the walls of that trap then. The foundation of it seems to be that biological hunger you hinted at earlier, the fear of being alone.
Yes, we really have to destigmatize the fear of being alone. It is not a character flaw. It is an evolved biological alarm system.
Because in the past, isolation was dangerous.
For hundreds of thousands of years of human history, separation from the tribe meant literal death by starvation or predation. Your brain maps social isolation precisely the same way it maps physical pain.
And draining people, particularly highly manipulative partners, they exploit this asymmetry.
They absolutely do. They realize you are biologically terrified of the wilderness, so they make themselves your only shelter.
Oh, wow.
They slowly isolate you from your friends and family, making themselves your sole source of connection, so that the thought of leaving them triggers a primal survival panic.
And then you layer on top of that the psychological rationalization, which is the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes, a very powerful cognitive bias.
The sunk cost fallacy is usually applied to economics, right? Like pouring more money into a failing stock because you don't want to admit you made a bad trade.
Yes, but it applies to emotional investments just as powerfully. We have a profound psychological aversion to feeling wasteful.
So if you have invested 7 years, your youth, and thousands of hours of emotional labor into trying to fix a partner.
Your brain desperately demands a return on that investment.
So when the reality that this person is actively destroying my health collides with the reality that I have invested a decade of my life into them, your brain just breaks a little bit.
It creates unbearable cognitive dissonance.
Wow.
And the human brain resolves that discomfort by minimizing the abuse. You tell yourself, it's not that bad, or they had a really traumatic childhood, they can't help it.
You justify your own suffering because acknowledging it means acknowledging that the last 7 years were basically loss.
Exactly. But the stickiest part of the trap, the part that genuinely makes a toxic relationship feel like a clinical addiction, is trauma bonding.
And the source explains this through the slot machine effect, which is fascinating. I've always thought of the slot machine effect as something that applies to casinos, or maybe why I can't stop scrolling TikTok.
Right, the dopamine loop.
How does a human being become a slot machine for someone else's brain? That seems like a massive leap.
It's actually not a leap at all. It's the exact same neurochemical pathway.
Yeah.
This is called variable ratio reinforcement, and it is crucial to understand.
Okay, walk us through it.
If you have a partner who is 100% cruel all the time, you will eventually leave. There's no reward to keep you there. If you have a partner who is 100% kind and predictable, you form a secure, calm attachment.
Boring, but healthy.
Right. But if you have a partner who is unpredictable, who is horribly cruel and demeaning on Tuesday, but on Wednesday suddenly buys you flowers, cries, and tells you you're the only person who understands them,
Yeah.
they have put your brain on a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement.
So I'm pulling the lever. Most of the time I lose, and it hurts. But every once in a while, completely at random, the bells ring, the coins pour out, and they are nice to me.
Exactly. And behavioral psychology has known for nearly a century that variable ratio schedules produce the highest response rates and the greatest resistance to extinction in any animal.
Why is that?
The unpredictability creates massive spikes of dopamine when the reward finally comes. The relief of them simply stopping the abuse and being nice to you feels like a euphoric high.
Wow. So in a toxic relationship, you aren't actually addicted to the person. You are addicted to the relief from the pain that the person is causing you.
Yes, and it produces an attachment bond that is empirically stronger, meaning vastly harder to break, than a bond built on consistent kindness.
That's incredibly sad.
It is. The trauma bond literally outlasts the relationship. Even months after you physically leave, your neurochemistry is still craving that specific dopamine hit.
That explains why people go back an average of 7 times before leaving an abusive partner for good.
Yes, it takes immense effort to break.
Yeah. But it's also tied to our deepest sense of identity, isn't it? The source talks about identity fusion and codependency, especially for people who grew up in chaotic homes.
Yes. If you grew up as the identified patient in a family or in an enmeshed system where your only value was managing your parents' explosive emotions, you learn a very dangerous lesson.
Which is?
That love equals managing someone else's chaos. You develop highly porous boundaries.
You literally do not know who you are if you aren't actively trying to fix someone else's crisis.
Precisely. To leave the draining person feels like psychological self-annihilation. And this is driven by repetition compulsion. Freud had observed this over a century ago, and modern attachment theory confirms it.
Repetition compulsion, what does that mean?
We unconsciously seek out adult relationships that mirror our unhealed childhood wounds.
So if I had a highly critical, emotionally unavailable mother, I am unconsciously scanning the room for a cold, avoidant partner. Why on earth would my brain do that?
Because it feels like home. Your brain recognizes the pattern.
Yeah.
It is unconsciously trying to recreate the original trauma environment so it can finally win the game this time.
Oh, wow.
It thinks, if I can just get this critical person to love me, it will retroactively heal the wound from my mother. It locks anxious and avoidant people together in a highly stable, yet utterly miserable trap.
Okay, this is getting intense. We've covered the immune system destruction, the financial workplace ruin, and the biological traps keeping us stuck in the maze.
It's a heavy toll.
It is. But we've talked entirely about what staying costs you right now in the present. But what the source material does so brilliantly is pivot to the future. Because the true tragedy of the hidden tax isn't just the pain of the present moment.
No, it's the compounding opportunity cost.
Exactly. It's the entirely different life you are actively sacrificing.
Opportunity cost is perhaps the most sobering lens through which to view a draining relationship. Let's start with the absolute most finite resource in the universe.
Right.
Your time.
Right.
An average human life is roughly 4,000 weeks long. That's it.
That sounds so short when you put it like that.
It is short. Every single year you spend trying to fix a covert narcissist or managing the tantrums of a malignant boss is 52 weeks that you can never, ever get back.
And it's not just the hours on the clock, it's the bandwidth tax. The source mentions a 13-point drop in IQ. Wait, how does stress literally lower your intelligence? Are brain cells dying?
It's about resource allocation in the brain. Research into the psychology of scarcity shows that when the human brain is under severe, chronic stress, whether that's financial poverty or relational poverty, it tunnels its attention.
It tunnels it.
Yes. The amygdala, which processes threat, hijacks the system. It reroutes blood flow and metabolic energy away from the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for high-level executive function, creativity, and long-term planning.
So my brain is actively shutting down the smart part of my mind because it thinks I'm in a war zone.
Yes. You are forced to focus solely on the immediate threat, managing the explosive partner, surviving the next hostile email. This constant vigilance imposes a measurable tax on your cognitive capacity.
And that's the 13 points.
The data suggests it is equivalent to a 13-point drop in functional IQ.
A 13-point drop. That's the difference between average intelligence and being clinically impaired.
It's massive.
It's almost like having 50 high-definition video tabs open on your web browser. You think you're just looking at one simple spreadsheet, but the fan on your laptop is screaming, the mouse is lagging.
Yeah, because a toxic argument from Tuesday is still rendering in 4K resolution in the background.
Exactly. You don't even realize the tabs are open, but they are draining 80% of your RAM.
That is a brilliant analogy. And because your cognitive battery is constantly hovering at 10%, you cannot open the applications you actually want to use.
The novel you didn't write, the business you didn't launch.
The physical health you didn't maintain. These aren't separate, unrelated failures of your willpower. They are the direct downstream effects of where your cognitive RAM was being spent.
And that leads directly to the next cost, which I found deeply tragic. The people you cannot meet.
Yes, the social opportunity cost.
The source brings in Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. If we think of Maslow's pyramid, food and shelter at the bottom, safety next, then love, then esteem, and self-actualization at the very tip.
Right. Maslow observed that human development must happen in sequence. You cannot focus on self-actualization, deep philosophical connection, creativity, purpose, if you are starving.
Or if your physical and emotional safety is constantly threatened.
Exactly. When you are tethered to a draining person, you are permanently regressed to the bottom rungs of that ladder.
You are stuck down there, just trying to secure basic sanity. And because you are stuck at the bottom, you are completely invisible to the people at the top.
You are. You are living in a state of chronic incongruence. You are shrinking yourself, monitoring your words, suppressing your authentic personality just to keep the peace.
Yeah.
And while you are broadcasting on that frequency of fear and management, you are mathematically unable to attract or deeply connect with healthy, highly developed, secure people. They simply aren't operating on the frequency you are forced to broadcast.
Because you are forfeiting co-regulation. Polyvagal theory comes up here, which I know sounds like dense neuroscience, but it's basically how humans are designed to regulate their nervous systems through trusted others, right?
Yes, co-regulation is essential.
Can you clarify the brain-gut connection there?
Certainly. The vagus nerve is a massive cranial nerve that wanders from your brainstem all the way down through your heart, your lungs, and into your gut. It is the superhighway of your parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest state.
Exactly. Clinical experts call a secure relationship the couple bubble. In a healthy dynamic, a calm vocal tone, soft eye contact, and safe physical touch literally raise your vagal tone.
They send a signal down that superhighway telling your organs that the war is over.
Yes. They tell your biology it is safe to rest, to digest food properly, and to repair tissue. A toxic partner, however, forces your body into a constant state of sympathetic mobilization.
Fight or flight.
Yes. So the opportunity cost of staying isn't just the act of abuse you endure. It is the profound loss of the biological healing you would be receiving every single day if you were with a secure partner.
So if we look at the whole board, what does this actually mean for someone's life trajectory?
It means the cost is compounding. Think about it. A regulated nervous system sleeps deeply.
Right.
Because it sleeps deeply, it makes sharper, more creative decisions at work. Because it makes better decisions, it earns more money and earns promotions.
And because it is secure, it has the energy to form rich, diverse friendships.
Exactly. That data showing a 50% increase in survival odds isn't magic. It is the mathematical result of that positive feedback loop compounding daily over decades.
Oh.
The true tragedy of the hidden tax is the compounded dividends of the beautiful, actualized life you didn't get to live, simply because you spent your 4,000 weeks managing someone else's pathology.
Okay. The trap is brilliantly illuminated. The cost is undeniably too high. We've established the biology, the psychology, the lost future.
Yeah.
So how do we get out?
The exit strategy.
Yeah. How does the listener who is having a horrible realization right now actually get free? Let's talk about strategies for the exit and how to reclaim your biology.
The first step is diagnosing the reality of the relationship. And you do that by completely bypassing your rationalizing, excuse-making brain. You have to trust your body. We call this the somatic diagnostic.
The source calls it the after feeling.
Yes.
Yes.
Pay intense attention to how you physically feel in the hour after spending time with someone, because your mind will lie to you.
It definitely will. And it'll say, oh, they're just stressed at work, or they didn't mean it that way. They're actually a good person.
Exactly. But as the trauma literature extensively proves, the body keeps the score. Your body registers the threat that your mind is trying to rationalize.
So what am I looking for physically?
Do you have heavy eyelids? A sudden sinking sensation in your gut? Are your shoulders creeping up to your ears?
Yeah.
Do you feel a pervasive, heavy sense of self-doubt and exhaustion that wasn't there an hour ago? That is not random biological noise. That is highly accurate diagnostic data from your nervous system. Trust it.
So once my body tells me, hey, this person is a toxin, the next step is boundaries, which is everyone's favorite therapy buzzword, but actually executing a boundary is a nightmare for most people.
It is very difficult.
The source says resentment is the first sign a boundary is needed.
Resentment is an incredibly useful emotion. It is your internal compass pointing directly at a violated boundary.
But people misunderstand what a boundary is, right?
Constantly. A boundary is not a set of rules you impose on another person. You cannot make a toxic person be nice, and trying to do so is a waste of energy.
Oh.
A boundary simply defines what you will and will not participate in.
Give me an example.
The most effective formula is conditional. When X happens, I will Y.
When you yell at me, I will physically leave the room.
Exactly. When you bring up my weight, I will hang up the phone. You are taking the cost of the bad behavior, the discomfort, the shame which you have been silently absorbing, and you are placing it squarely back on the offender's side of the line.
I have to ask, though, setting that first boundary sounds terrifying, especially for someone who grew up codependent. How does a listener push past the immense guilt of suddenly putting up walls against their own mother or their spouse of 10 years?
This raises a profoundly difficult question, and the answer is a hard, unavoidable truth. Short-term discomfort is the strict price of long-term peace.
You just have to endure it.
Yes.
Yeah.
A highly toxic, narcissistic person will not change. The clinical data is overwhelming on this point. The only variable you actually control in the entire equation is your own access.
You will feel terribly guilty then.
You will feel terribly guilty. You will feel afraid of their reaction. But you must expect that internal resistance, Hold the line and tolerate the guilt until it begins to fade.
And what if boundaries fail completely? Because we know covert narcissists view a boundary just as a challenge to bulldoze over. The research outlines 2 specific escalating strategies for this: gray rock and no contact.
Yes. If you cannot leave the situation entirely, for example, if you share custody of a child with this person, or they're a manager you cannot immediately escape, you deploy the gray rock method.
Gray rock.
This relies on the fundamental behavioral principle of extinction. Narcissistic and dramatic people feed on emotional reactions. Your anger, your tears, your frantic explanations, that is their supply.
So to gray rock is to become as profoundly uninteresting and emotionally flat as a gray rock in the mud.
Precisely. You give brief, factual, monotonous answers. Yes, no, I understand. You show no anger, no joy, no fear. You give them absolutely zero emotional surface area to grab onto.
And what does that do?
When their primitive brain realizes they can no longer harvest dopamine from you, they will eventually grow bored and look for a new source of supply.
But the caveat the source mentions is that gray rock can sometimes cause an extinction burst.
Yes, that's a dangerous escalation.
Where they try even harder to get a reaction right before they give up, so it's not recommended if there's a threat of physical violence.
Right. Safety first. Always.
In those cases, or whenever it's physically possible, the ultimate goal is no contact.
Total, absolute cessation of communication. Blocking on all platforms, all emails, avoiding shared physical spaces.
Why so extreme, though?
Because of the variable ratio trauma bond we discussed earlier. A trauma bond is a neurochemical addiction. You cannot break a heroin addiction by taking just a little bit of heroin every Tuesday. You have to completely starve the receptor.
The withdrawals must be agonizing.
They are. The clinical literature suggests it takes roughly 60 to 90 days of absolute zero contact for the neurochemical grip of a trauma bond to truly begin to loosen.
2 to 3 months.
It will likely be the hardest 2 to 3 months of your emotional life, but it is the biological prerequisite to breaking the fever.
And doing that alone is almost impossible, which brings us to the importance of structured support. The source specifically mentions somatic therapies like somatic experiencing, or EMDR, to help physically regulate the vagus nerve that's been trapped in fight or flight.
Professional help is crucial, yes.
But it also highlights a critical need outside of professional therapy, the need for a chosen community.
Yes. The concept of a sangha, drawn from the Buddhist tradition, or the modern concept of a chosen family. Because when you cut this draining person out, you're going to feel a massive, terrifying void.
Right, because they took up so much space.
You need a scaffolding of healthy, accountable, growth-oriented people to catch you when the withdrawal hits. You must deliberately architect your chosen community.
Which perfectly connects to the final section of our deep dive today. We've gone through the modern neuroscience, the 85-year Harvard longevity data, the corporate ROI statistics, the clinical psychology of trauma bonds.
We've covered a lot of modern ground.
We have. But what is truly staggering to me is that to wrap this all up, the research looks backward. It turns out modern science, with its MRIs and blood panels, is just now proving what the ancient wisdom traditions have been screaming at humanity for millennia.
It is a breathtaking convergence across thousands of years of human observation. Long before we could measure allostatic load or map the vagus nerve, careful observers of the human condition realized that character is highly contagious.
Let's look at the Buddha. I absolutely loved this detail in the source. His attendant, Ananda, comes up to him and says, "I think having admirable friends is half of the holy life."
And the Buddha corrects him.
He does. He says, no, admirable friendship isn't half of the holy life. It is the whole of the holy life.
The entirety of it. The Buddha explicitly warned his followers against the taker, the flatterer, the reckless companion. He instructed them to uniquely associate with those advanced in virtue because he understood that we inevitably emulate who we are exposed to.
And then you have Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, writing nearly 2,000 years ago about the immense danger of crowds. He wrote that we never bring back home the same character we took abroad.
That the crowd taints us unconsciously.
He literally predicted the afferent feedback loop and emotional contagion without knowing what a neuron was. And Aristotle, writing that only friendships of virtue endure because goodness is the only stable foundation.
We even see it in the proverb that is ubiquitous in modern self-help. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It sounds like a simplification, but modern network science has proven the underlying biological mechanism.
The massive network studies, right? They tracked tens of thousands of people over decades.
Yes, they mapped out social networks and discovered that behaviors and emotional states spread up to 3 degrees of separation.
Wait, 3 degrees?
Yes. If your friend's friend's friend becomes lonely, your own statistical risk of loneliness increases. If someone 3 no's away from you becomes happier, your happiness increases.
It's wild to think that a massive, modern, longitudinal study basically acts as a peer-reviewed stamp of approval for a 2,500-year-old Buddhist proverb.
The synergy is perfect because the underlying truth is an inescapable law of nature. Character is contagious. Who you cluster with is your destiny. The wisdom traditions weren't being poetic or metaphorical. They were making literal biological observations about the human animal.
Okay, let's bring this all home. If you've been listening to this deep dive, you now know that the stakes are as high as they can possibly be. We are talking about the physical healing of your immune system, the cognitive processing power of your brain, your financial stability, and the ultimate length of your life.
Everything is on the line.
The grand synthesis from all this dense research, from the allostatic load to the trauma bonds to the ancient Stoics, is what the author elegantly calls the asymmetry of the exit.
Yes, the asymmetry is the ultimate truth you must grasp. The pain of setting a boundary, the guilt of going no contact, the agonizing neurochemical withdrawal of breaking a trauma bond. That pain is very acute, but it is temporary.
It peaks, and then it permanently ends.
But the cost of staying. The cost of staying is chronic. It is an insidious compounding tax that quietly, day by day, bankrupts your health, your wealth, and your precious 4,000 weeks.
Trust your body's after feeling. Audit your inner circle right now. Do not settle for a toxic presence just because society or your own biology tells you that being alone is a death sentence. It is not.
It absolutely is not.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We talked about the terror of the void. When you finally cut out a draining parent, or leave that highly toxic partner, or quit that emotionally abusive job, your immediate primal fear is the empty space they leave behind in your life.
It feels like a terrifying vacuum.
But what if that emptiness isn't a void you need to be afraid of? What if that blank, quiet space is actually the strict biological prerequisite, the mandatory landing pad that is required for the right people to finally enter your life? You cannot invite healthy, actualized, secure people into a house that is filled with smoke. You have to clear the room first.
You have to clear the room. The ultimate cost of staying is the person you do not become and the people you do not find. Choose your company carefully, and then keep choosing.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep protecting your energy, keep trusting your body, and we will